the summer of 2011, and the power of social media and online music streaming is right around the corner, but it hasn't changed the world yet. But A$AP Rocky, a 23-year-old rapper from New York who basically became an international star overnight, is a big signal that times are changing. He sits at the center of a record-breaking $3 million bidding war after dropping just 2 songs to the public.
I bring you out on stage with me, and he didn't have a deal at the time. I brought him on stage, man, people went crazy.
Make some noise for A$AP Rocky!
At the same time, though, his music was unlike anything that had ever come out of New York before. Taking heavy inspiration from Houston and Memphis, his slow, trippy, psychedelic songs were controversial. 6 months earlier, though, he was just a kid in Harlem making songs about smoking weed and hanging out. He had only been in a recording studio 2 times in his life.
Please welcome A$AP Rocky.
Now he was leading a movement that would take over the rap game.
You want some more crazy shit? You want some more?
But behind the sudden explosion of fame stands a young guy dealing with a lifetime of trauma. His father spent the last 15 years of his life in prison, his brother was murdered when he was a child, he spent years homeless in New York City with his mom.
You know, I used to live into a homeless shelter. Those 2-3 years was just crazy, you know, being homeless, you know, so it was a lot. Who you are, everybody has struggle.
Yeah, man.
It doesn't matter how fortunate you are, everybody has struggle, because life is struggle. You know, you gotta struggle to survive.
So the question was, how can a kid carrying that much pain grow up and change music forever? And would the rocket ship towards fame take its toll on someone who had already been through so much? This video is brought to you by Nebula, the only place where you can watch my original documentary Danger Music, the true story behind some of the most disgusting, scary, dangerous music ever made. So go to nebula.tv/Volksgeist to see that and countless other quality original content from movies to documentaries. It's the home of the best creators on the internet. More about that later. In 1988, Renee Black, an assistant nurse from New York City with roots in South Africa, had a son. She and her boyfriend Adrian Myers named him Rakim, after one of the stars of the legendary New York rap duo Eric B. and Rakim, who were just getting big in the city at the time. And Rakim, or Rocky as he would be known from a young age, was born and raised in Harlem, one of the most legendary and influential areas of New York City. For well over 100 years, Harlem has been known for producing countless writers, actors, musicians, and more. And the neighborhood's influence didn't shrink when its black population skyrocketed in the 1930s. In fact, it only got even bigger. Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Marcus Garvey, and Duke Ellington all grew up in the area. After World War II, people like James Baldwin, Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr., and Malcolm X all came out of the neighborhood and made their own global impacts. And then in the age of hip-hop, Big L, Jim Jones, Q-Tip, and many more became hugely influential rappers, all starting their careers on the streets of Harlem. Basically, Harlem is possibly the craziest cultural melting pot in the history of the US. In a neighborhood of less than 200,000 people, it's genuinely crazy how much global impact and history could come out of one tiny area. But while Rocky might have grown up in the middle of the most significant, vibrant neighborhood in the greatest city in the world, it was also a double-edged sword. Because Harlem, when Rocky was a kid in the 90s, was by far the most dangerous and impoverished part of Manhattan, an island of violence and drug trafficking in the middle of the financial capital of the world. And Rocky's childhood mirrored that harsh reality around him. After being devastated by the crack epidemic, schools in Harlem were failing, violence was a fact of life, and opportunity had vanished. He wasn't just growing up in poverty. He was born into the kind of environment most Americans only see on screens. The Harlem that Rocky was born into was kind of just sad, and eventually, even Rocky's family got up and left. When he was 9 years old, his parents moved the family to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a small town 3 hours away in the Appalachian Mountains, and Harrisburg is where Rocky discovered hip-hop. He later told a story about how he went to the music store at the mall and had to discover between buying a cassette tape of the Mortal Kombat soundtrack or a Rakim album. Ultimately, his older brother convinced him to get the rap album. And in that moment, when he was only 10 or 11 years old, his lifelong passion for hip-hop was born. Unfortunately, though, the troubles of Harlem followed his family not far behind.
Up until like I was 11, man, I had a good life, man. I'm not gonna sit here and lie, man. I had it all. As a child, all you want is Jordans and toys and candy and, you know, and clothes and stuff. And my pops used to give me all that shit, man. He was a big-time hustler.
Rocky's father, who he always describes as a clean-cut guy who dressed formally and told his kids to be true to themselves, had in fact moved them to Pennsylvania so he could traffic drugs more easily.
My dad went to jail They seized all the money, took away everything, and
There's an interview with MTV from 2013 when Rocky was starting to become a bigger player in the music industry. In the interview, Rocky gave a tour of the exact locations in Harlem that defined his childhood in New York. He started at an old apartment building on 116th and Morningside Drive, and at first, it sounded pretty normal. It hasn't changed much. Every time I come back, I hear the same stories. Maybe someone got shot, someone had a baby, or someone went to jail. But then the interview got dark. It turns out that life didn't really change for the better after his mom brought the family back to New York. In fact, the struggle got worse. When Rocky was 13 years old, his older brother, the same kid who inspired his hairstyle and introduced him to rapping, was murdered just a block away from where they lived.
10 years ago, February 26, Ricky was shot, and he died that same day.
I know for a fact my brother had something to do with my success. Even before he died, he had something to do with it, so.
Just when things felt like they couldn't get worse, the family ended up living in a homeless shelter at 104th and Broadway not long after. They just didn't have anywhere else to go.
I had no choice. The shelter was on 104th and Broadway. It was called Volunteers of America.
There were a lot of hard times in that place, but it wasn't the end of the world because life is what you make it. There's always people out there who have it better, but this is a place that helps women and families get on their feet. And before you know it, things are all right. It's no different than living in the projects, but it's not easy, and that's when you start idolizing the drug dealers and the hustlers. If you're from any kind of fucked up environment, you'll start to idolize stupid shit. Still though, a 14-year-old Rocky wasn't immune to the pressure and the influence of the outside world. Within a few years, he was dealing drugs in Harlem, and by the time he was 16, he was booked into jail for attempted murder after he started shooting at a local bully who had pissed him off. After the shooting, he was booked into Rikers Island, New York City's largest jail, infamous for violence and physical and mental abuse of its inmates, and often ranked as one of the worst jails in the United States. But his cellmate was a kid from Brooklyn just a few years older than him, who at only 18 years old was already used to life behind bars and ended up protecting Rocky the whole time he was there, making sure that people stayed away from the kid who pretty obviously didn't belong. It was only years later, once Rocky became a famous rapper, that he realized the kid from Brooklyn who protected him on Rikers Island had become a well-known artist in his own way, going by the name Casanova.
It was A$AP Rocky who was talking about you, and he said that when he was in jail, you actually helped him.
Yeah.
You looked out for him.
A homegirl of mine was, I guess, in the same area as him, and he was like, I guess a topic came up about jail, and he was like, I don't like jail. I'm never going to jail again, or whatever the case may be. And she's like, you ain't been in jail. He's like, what? I've been in jail. I know a dude named Casanova. He saved me. You know what I'm saying? Showed me the rope.
Rocky was only locked up for 2 weeks until his family got him bailed out, but he later said that that experience changed his life forever, making him realize that he never wanted to be in that situation again.
Prove by telling niggas I've been on the aisle and I was in jail, or that don't mean nothing to me. That's not what it's about.
Right.
It's about staying out of there. Exactly. And that's what I meant when I said to y'all, I love y'all, and I get it, because I was there too.
He wasn't a tough guy. He was, in fact, just a creative kid who was interested in fashion, music, and art, and he always had been. And not long after that, he would meet the friends who would change his life forever, without whom A$AP Rocky, the world-famous rapper, would probably never exist. In 2006, the year after Rocky was fighting for his life on Rikers Island, a half Puerto Rican, half Dominican kid from Harlem named Steven Rodriguez, who went by Yams, was making a name for himself in the music industry. Yams wasn't a producer or rapper himself, though. Instead, he was the creative director. A real creative director, though, not a rich kid who walks around in tacky outfits pretending to be artistic. Because after landing the opportunity to be an unpaid intern packing up mixtapes for Dipset, he eventually built a hugely well-known Tumblr account that he used to promote underground rappers with memes and reposts. He had the taste and the natural ability to build up and market just about anything. And in 2007, he formed the A$AP Mob, short for Always Strive and Prosper, with a few friends from around Harlem. At first, it was more of a group of people who knew each other, doing their own thing, dressing up, hanging out downtown, and posting photos more than anything else. But pretty soon, Yams realized that if he was able to manage producers and make money off of it, why not build his own brand and take full creative control? Meanwhile, across Harlem, Rocky, who was now 19 or 20, was making his own music with a different crew.
My crew was named MDB, right? And A$AP. Like, I was in between, like, both crews type shit, right? Okay.
MDB was more like a get money, like Harlem type of crew type shit. ASAP was like more of like get fly, go downtown, get girls, get money type shit,
From
right?
the Bronx and Harlem, kind of.
From the Bronx and Harlem type shit, right? But we would go down to Soho, or we would go down to like Lower East Side and all that downtown and shit, hang out.
Those fly niggas.
Yeah, type shit, right?
And when Yams first heard about him, never having met him before, even though they were from the same neighborhood and knew a lot of the same people, he immediately realized that Rocky might be something special.
And when I met them, it was in Harlem. It was a mixture of Bronx and Harlem dudes. When I came in, I'm just like, yo, I know how to take this shit to the next level. But you know, I was on some rapping shit. They was just, everybody was on some just get fly and fashion model shit, right? So I was just trying to figure out how to monetize it or whatever, you know what I'm saying, and capitalize. So, and ASAP used to treat Yams like he was like Yoda or some shit, like for real.
Like real shit.
Yeah, they used to praise him.
Yams wanted to rewrite the rules of New York hip-hop. He had the taste, the vision, and the ambition to build something bigger than himself. All he needed was a blank slate to work on. And he immediately felt like Rocky could be the perfect person to take from a local rapper with a man bun to a global phenomenon who changes hip-hop forever. First though, he had to teach Rocky how to make a good song. Yams later said this about meeting Rocky for the first time. When I first met him, he sounded like Kid Cudi mixed with Lil Wayne. He used to sound more like a stoner rapper, and I just wasn't trying to hear it. Not trying to hear about people getting high and smoking doobies. I was trying to hear some real shit. When I first met Rocky, he had only recorded 3 tracks and had barely ever gone in the studio before. He didn't know how to work. It sounded like he was mumbling. He needed to get everything together. And so once he convinced Rocky to follow his lead, nothing would be the same again. He later said,
so I got linked up with Rocky and stuff like that, and then me and him clicked just like that. I knew what was the perfect sound for him, and he knew what he wanted for himself stylistically.
Because the effort that Yams put in to build Rocky up paid off a lot faster than anyone expected. One minute, he was a badly dressed 22-year-old rapper in Harlem with a pin-straight man bun, sounding more like Ice JJ Fish than an actual artist. And then, practically overnight, he was the future of New York hip-hop, because it would only take one single song before Rocky's career was set in stone. Rocky's first single after linking up with Yams, Purple Swag, didn't sound like anything that had ever come out of New York City before. But it hit hard as hell, and it became an instant hit with an iconic video and a sound that was described as Andre 3000 meets Houston. East Coast rap with a slow, druggy Southern sound. It was something that had really never been done before. It ended up hitting local radio stations in under a week, leading to a domino effect that made A$AP Rocky a huge topic in New York basically overnight.
It's really good to hear myself on the radio today. You know what I mean? That's shit like that is pretty dope. You don't expect to turn on the radio. I don't know any DJ personnel. I don't know no DJs. They play all that A$AP shit off their own free will.
When he first came out with these songs, Purple Swag and Peso, he immediately had all eyes on him. But a lot of people had a big issue with the degree to which his sound was influenced by Southern hip hop. But it wasn't just a lighthearted debate either. A lot of people may have felt he was coming up with a revolutionary new idea, but many others felt he was abandoning and disrespecting New York's legacy while stealing from the South at the same time. That might sound pretty unimaginable today, but back then, staying true to your city or state was pretty important. And A$AP Rocky is one of the earliest examples of someone breaking through that barrier.
Now, despite the fact that this kid is from New York, he doesn't really sound like a New York rapper to me. I would have never guessed this guy was from the East Coast if he didn't bring it up in his music so often.
But what many critics failed to predict was that he wasn't simply disrespecting New York rap or biting another city's sound.
People could say anything they want about Rocky. Talk about, he sounds like he's from here, he sounds like he's from there. I don't care what nobody says. People don't know what New York rap sounds like in 2012, because it's been so messed up for the past 5 years. You can get with the program or stay in the past and pop bottles and to corny records and things of that nature.
It's about daring to differ, and I feel like that's really missing in hip-hop these days. People are scared to be different or be themselves, for that matter.
The thing is, though, that Rocky wasn't moving different just to be different. There are actually dozens of interviews of Rocky from this time sitting in long forgotten corners of YouTube that show it wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he had his own vision he didn't want to compromise. He wasn't just some disrespectful kid, he was someone chasing a goal on a whole other level with his own beliefs and culture. Even Rocky's interviews from back then were controversial because he seemed to have no problem saying stuff that most people in his position wouldn't.
I kick down the door for kids that's my age, older and younger, to be able to wear Jeremy Scott sneakers, rips in their jeans, and not feel gay. Because that's what, society of the urban community tries to portray, that if you do certain things like, snug fashion, high-end fashion, other things that's not really in the criteria of the small state of mind of the urban community, you're gay. Different is gay. I used to be homophobic, but as I got older, I realized that wasn't the way to do things, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't discriminate against anybody for their sexual preference, for their skin color. That's immature, Not only that, not only do I know the difference between that, but I'm wise enough to know that that's just stupid and wrong. And I'm just trying to set the bar that you can do what the fuck you want to do because the world is yours.
Again though, Rocky coming out with such a random yet authentic personality wasn't him being weird, it was him embracing his real life and what he really thought and leveraging it to the biggest extent he could. And the craziest part was that Rocky had done all of this without ever looking for approval from people in the city. One of the biggest quotes from him after this big break was, "I don't even consider myself to be a real New York rapper. I don't even like New York rappers." Not only did Rocky and Yams not seek approval from their city to help on the come up, they outright rejected it. And ultimately, listeners loved Rocky's first 2 singles so much that Yams had industry contacts beefing with him because he wasn't even picking up the phone to have a conversation about signing Rocky to a label. After Purple Swag dropped, that was the most annoying time. Everyone in the industry hated me. They were saying, fuck Yams, why doesn't he pick up the phone? Rocky needs actual serious management. But what happened was I turned my phone off. People were just bothering us. They were trying to give us the new artist deal, the $50,000 to $100,000 bullshit deal. And I said, I'm good. But all the signs point to one culprit, Yams. Yams got him to try a new sound and new lyrics. He pushed him to get better at rapping. He ran blogs that he used to put Rocky's music in front of an online audience. He set up the blueprint for Rocky to sign a neck-breaking, eye-watering record deal when they were both 23 years old.
I'm the boss of the whole operation. Like, nothing goes through without me and Rocky approving it first. And whatever Rocky does, I make sure I'm hands-on with all of that stuff. I would consider Rocky to be Luke Skywalker, and I'll probably be like Yoda.
Most importantly though, Yams had the rare gift of being able to perfectly understand how to make things blow up online, in a time when that wasn't even a thought in most people's minds. Today, record labels practically force their artists to make trendy TikTok videos, dancing in front of cameras, doing everything but making music in the hopes of making themselves go viral. But back then, what Yams did with Rocky was practically unheard of, and that's why it worked so well. With fashion photos, memes, videos, quotes, not chasing industry cosigns or label support, but instead building a digital presence that ensured people all over the world would perceive Rocky as a rising icon. And while people might have been intimidated or angry or even offended by that at first, in reality it was nothing but a sign of how the entire industry would operate in just a few years.
Was it crazy, sort of the impact you made so quickly on hip-hop? Do you find
I find that fascinating. I find it crazy. It's radical for the simple fact that I did all of it off the mixtape. It's not a commercial album, meaning there was no money invested or pushed into it. You know, there was no machine behind it. It was all organic and natural. It's not like it was forced. Like, you turn on your TV, every 5 minutes you hear the song. It wasn't like that, you know? It was just something that, you know, people did on their own time. So.
Was that a crazy trip, though, or did you sort of expect that? Did you just have that feeling, you know, I'm gonna do this, it's good? Because you know you're a talented dude.
Yeah, I always felt talented. I just didn't, I always wanted that. And I always hoped for it, and I always felt like it was possible. And that's how I try to keep my attitude, because they needed something different in hip-hop. I changed hip-hop within a year. Yeah, man.
Nowadays, many commentators say that it might do more harm than good to rely on your local identity to get established. But when Rocky did it, it was like he and Yams had flipped the whole game on its head. And so in a way, ignoring those local label calls offering $50,000 or $100,000 to sign Rocky was probably the best decision Yams ever made, because RCA ended up giving A$AP Rocky a $3 million deal after he had only dropped 2 songs, an amount of money that was almost unheard of. Many people called it the biggest record deal since 50 Cent.
First single Peso, which received a ton of attention online, but it was his follow-up track Purple Swag that managed to snag him a 2-year, $3 million record deal before he even released a full mixtape.
And then, just a couple of days after Rocky was signed for $3 million with only 2 songs out, he dropped one of the best mixtapes ever made. Live Love ASAP wasn't just a mixtape, it was the dawn of a new era. Dropping on Halloween in 2011, it was the musical equivalent of designer fashion, familiar yet alien at the same time.
Well, artists that I'm just like shitting, I just flew past them because it's like they don't have any kind of creative aesthetic. It's just, yo, let's get a bottle and a car and some bitches and get in front of the camera.
It wasn't just Rocky's big first statement, it was a big step forward for rap as a whole. Live Love ASAP definitely wasn't universally loved though. In fact, a lot of people just hated A$AP Rocky when this first came out, and he was getting probably every criticism you could imagine.
You know what I think this is? Once again, kind of like the Tyler situation. I think this is a young person's album. The dude's 23, 24 years old, and he made an album for people that were young. This is not something that people our age are gonna listen to. Not only that, like when I put this on, I literally, just like me, I literally got the track. I turned it on. Finally got it. That's what I was like, man, I was like, this can't be the right album.
Yeah, that's all
because it's fucking horrible. And I hate to talk bad about the dude because I've heard he's a really nice guy, but this album is horrendous. So this motherfucker got a $3 million deal. And there's still dudes out there struggling.
But still, its impact was going to be massive anyway. With Rocky becoming an absolute rock star for kids in the younger generation, it didn't really matter what the critics said, the tide had already changed in his favor. And we can't talk about Live Love ASAP without diving deep into the ethereal soundscapes crafted by Clams Casino, a New Jersey-based producer who wasn't just a collaborator with Rocky, but instead the architect who helped shape the foundation of Rocky's early sound, bringing the magic ingredient that made Live Love ASAP a classic mixtape overnight and keeps it timeless to this day. Clams beats were beautiful and dreamlike, these hazy, floating compositions that still sound new in 2025. And I'm not the only one who thinks that either. A new remix of a Rocky and Clams Casino song was just re-released a year ago, and it has 500 million streams on Spotify despite being built off a song from 2011. Because what Clams Casino brought to Live Love ASAP was more than just beats, it was atmosphere. Almost no one was making music like this at the time, but even the people who weren't shooting up into the mainstream like Rocky was. But that lo-fi, psychedelic, dreamlike trap-inspired sound would go on to inspire so many other artists like Playboi Carti, Young Lean, and hundreds more. In the end, Live Love ASAP did a ton to get that dreamy, fuzzy sound out there in the world. And that's mostly thanks to Yams and his skill for curating sounds. Rocky wasn't the best rapper ever, at least not yet, but there's an originality to everything that makes it stand out to this day. In under 6 months, A$AP Rocky had gone from being a nobody sitting up in Harlem making songs about smoking weed to being one of the hottest rappers in the game. In the summer of 2012, he was at Coachella, the Pitchfork Music Festival, only further proving that him and Yams had unlocked the cheat code for a new era of artists. But Rocky became an instant icon. With just one mixtape out in the world, the fan base, the impact, and the cult of personality around him was unprecedented. Rocky and his crew were so tapped in that everyone wanted to be like them. If you were into hip hop or not, they were making an impact all over the world. People loved Rocky. He was on stage getting bras thrown at him. He had so many groupies that he later discussed the sex addiction he developed back then. Whether it was men or women, with men wanting to dress like him and women wanting to be with him, he was reaching a different level of underground meets mainstream fame at the same time. But even A$AP Rocky couldn't be loved by everybody. And I've mentioned this already, but the sound that propelled him to fame so quickly was in a lot of ways thanks to the team of producers and curators around him. Another person who was a big part of that growth was Space Ghost Perp, who rapped on 2 songs from Live Love ASAP and also produced a track for the mixtape as well.
A$AP Rocky, you know what I mean? That pretty motherfucker, you know? It's my twin. Space Ghost motherfucking Perp.
But not long after that, he ended up accusing Rocky of stealing his lyrics, and he even said that he had been jumped and beat up in New York by guys from A$AP Mob when he told them he didn't want to work with the crew anymore.
Space Ghost Perp, man. What's going on with that, B?
F him, straight up, you know what I'm saying? He one of those cats, like, a lot of guys just hang around me, try to get high, and, you know, when they dip off, start throwing dirt on the young blood, they can't stop the pretty motherfucker, you know what I'm saying?
Still though, a lot of people discuss to this day how much influence Space Ghost had on ASAP Mob early on. He helped establish the aesthetics and the sounds that they brought to a bigger stage. The story goes that Rocky was heavily influenced by Space Ghost's flows, beats, fashion, and even lyricism, with Space Ghost Perp having started building on the hazy, cloudy Houston-Memphis sound before ASAP Rocky and Yams did. But even though he was influential, his aggressive lashing out and controversial tactics made it difficult for people to understand if he was being truthful from the start.
Fuck Miami, fuck Atlanta, fuck Chicago, fuck all you niggas, fuck LA, fuck Texas, fuck LA, fuck New York.
And ultimately, because of his tragic struggle with mental illness, his story, talent, and influence is mostly forgotten, even though Rocky kept growing in the mainstream for years. He was even later spotted living on the streets in Florida, suffering from episodes of mental illness. Tragically, Space Ghost Perp fell off the map and never really had a place in the music industry again after his falling out with Rocky. Long Live ASAP dropped in the winter of 2013, a more mature, bigger, better version of the debut mixtape heard around the world. An album with basically $1 million budget where Rocky and Yams could do whatever they wanted. And for this project, they had a mission. They wanted to make the statement that ASAP Rocky could be a huge artist and keep his sound at the same time. Wild for the Night is this really weird song that shows Rocky's versatility with him collaborating with Skrillex, creating this chaotic EDM rap hybrid that most people make fun of today, but definitely went hard back then. And then One Train is the Kendrick Lamar, Joey Badass, Yellow Wolf, Danny Brown, Action Bronson, Big Crit posse cut, 6 minutes long with no hook, just bars after bars over a haunting minimal beat. And then Fashion Killa was a pretty big sleeper hit that reveals Rocky's softer side and cements his connection to the fashion world, with its smooth, light production making it a cool, laid-back song that was almost more pop than rap, with more choruses than rap verses. And then there are a lot of parts off Long Live ASAP that are downright weird. Honestly, even weirder than anything from his mixtape. Jody is this demonic song where Rocky raps harder than ever on top of this 90s video game sample that sounds like a gargoyle, and then there's I Come Apart that finds him working directly with the lead vocalist from the British indie pop band Florence and the Machine to create this beautiful genre-defying pop ballad, and all of this comes together to just showcase this wild willingness to experiment outside traditional hip-hop boundaries. It's these moments of artistic risk-taking that revealed ASAP Rocky wasn't just chasing hits, he was genuinely pushing himself creatively. He was willing to take risks and do things that weren't being done. One of the more interesting songs from this era that didn't make it onto the final album was Riding with Lana Del Rey. It was originally intended to be a single for Long Live ASAP, but it was canceled after it leaked in an unfinished state. ASAP Rocky later said this:
"Her music is dope. She's a huge inspiration for me, and I feel like she's a female version of me."
Rocky had started off saying he didn't want to be a New York rapper, and he meant it. With a debut album featuring Drake, Kendrick Lamar, Skrillex, Florence and the Machine, and even Danger Mouse and Clams Casino, he was making good on that promise. 2 years later, ASAP Rocky was on a whole other level. He was no longer the weird kid making kind of underground music that didn't fit with the rest of New York. And sure enough, he and Yams were still working together as close as ever. And for the next project, they had a new direction in mind. After already having perfected cloud rap, they were chasing after a new vibe. This time, they set their sights on psychedelic rap, putting together ideas from neo-soul, singer-songwriters, and even rock and folk to make something new again. The album would be executive produced by Danger Mouse, a producer from New York known for working in the past with artists like Norah Jones, Red Hot Chili Peppers, MF Doom, and Adele. It doesn't get more diverse than that.
I've always wanted to work with him. And he worked with me, man, and he's been a mentor since and a big brother. And more than anything, just a really good, daring friend. He's a good friend. He's a dear friend of mine, and I really appreciate him and got me through some hard times in my life, you know, and always been there for me, always had my back, even when it doesn't have anything to do with business.
And not only did they have a legendary 30 times Grammy-nominated GOAT like Danger Mouse in the studio, they also had help from massive figures like Mark Ronson, Juicy J, Mike Dean, and even Kanye West, among many others. The album would feature artists like Future, MIA, Lil Wayne, Rod Stewart, and even Bones. The world they were building with this project was that of a massive blockbuster with niche and mainstream taste.
I mean, people in hip-hop, they haven't heard. You can't categorize this as a trip-hop album or a cloud rap album. It's just like, you know, how do you categorize it? So I feel like it's just a contemporary album, and for me, I wanted to try my best to create a masterpiece and inspire people and put them on and things, because like I said, my era A lot of them are oblivious. They don't know about like alternative music or psychedelic music for that matter. So I try to put them onto it.
But then, just a week after they dropped the lead single for this new album, Yams died suddenly at the age of 26. At first, A$AP Mob announced that he had tragically passed from complications of sleep apnea, but further investigation showed that he had accidentally overdosed on drugs. Either way, in that moment, the soul of the A$AP Mob was gone. Worst of all was something that Rocky would only start to discuss many years later, that he was the one who found Yams' body on the day he died. Yams wasn't just Rocky's creative partner. He was the visionary, the leader, the mastermind that guided and created everything about the A$AP Mob. He was the one who put Rocky on the right path, worked with him and made him into who he was. He had figured out how to market the music, what it should sound like, and everything in between. Most people seem to agree that without Yams, Rocky probably never would have made it in music. And right when they had evolved to the next level of music together, Rocky lost his brother, his mentor, and his creative partner in one terrible moment. Hundreds and thousands of articles were written about Yams' passing. At just 26 years old, he had already become one of the most influential creative entrepreneurs of his generation. At long last, A$AP was hugely successful. People liked it even more than Long Live A$AP, with critics praising its psychedelic soundscapes and emotional depth. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, and it represented Rocky's artistic growth with tracks like the dreamy atmosphere of LSD, Every Day featuring Rod Stewart, and the crazy chemistry between Rocky and Schoolboy Q on Electric Body. Before long, it started to be seen as one of the best rap albums of the 2010s. The album also prominently features guitar and vocals from an amateur British artist named Joe Fox that Rocky met while on a late-night walk in London in 2014. And so with a sound defined by the low-key alternative production from Danger Mouse, the haunting beauty of Joe Fox's vocals and guitar, and a long list of diverse influences and ideas, at long last A$AP was a huge creative victory for Rocky and Yams. At the time, it was so hyped that conversations about Rocky being one of the best rappers in the game were starting to be had. Back then in 2015, it wasn't unheard of for someone to say that Rocky might be able to reach the caliber that artists like Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, and others were chasing after at the time.
When they talk about the future of hip-hop and changing the game, they mention your name, they mention Kendrick, they mention J. Cole, they mention Tyler. Are you comfortable carrying that weight?
Of course.
Yeah?
Still though, the album's rollout was marked by sadness. Since the album rollout had already started when Yams passed away, the entire process was overshadowed by grief. But to honor Yams' legacy, A$AP Mob established an annual memorial show that became a huge tradition in New York. And 2015 and 2016 would be big years for the A$AP Mob. Yams had been heavily involved in the planning and production of A$AP Mob's first group mixtape, Cozy Tapes Volume 1, which ended up reaching the top 5 of the US hip-hop charts and featured artists like Lil Uzi, Tyler the Creator, Offset, Skepta, and Playboi Carti. And then they did another mixtape less than a year later, which again had an all-star cast and was just as successful, with hits like Wrath and Frat Rules. But after everything, when he passed, Yams left a huge void in the collective he had started and built from the ground up. Because today, the A$AP Mob is a distant memory. The second mixtape, despite being a hit, was the last thing they would ever do as a group. A$AP Yams being gone, the family vibe that defined them was replaced by something a lot more uncertain, and many A$AP members seem to have lost their way. Then A$AP Bari, one of the founding members with Yams, faced a pretty serious sexual assault allegation in 2017 that resulted in a huge lawsuit. It not only damaged his reputation, but it caused a lot of strain within the group, with members being forced to publicly address the situation and stand with or against him either way, putting their reputations on the line no matter what they said. A$AP Ant ended up leaving the group in 2019, and then A$AP 12V, despite releasing his debut album in 2017, never managed to break through to mainstream success. Even A$AP Nast, despite big fashion influence, struggled to establish himself as a solo artist.
But the news in the streets is you're not in A$AP. Are you or are you not?
Well, I don't think there is A$AP anymore. It's like
the whole collective has ended.
It's like, yeah, I don't. When is it's not a Cozy tape out, a new one, or I think it's a thing of the past.
So it's Ferg now. You're not A$AP Ferg anymore.
Yeah.
The community that was once there fell apart. The magic was gone, and A$AP Mob slowly became a memory of the past for most of its fans. It even got to a point where a lot of the more casual fans thought that A$AP Rocky's name was ASAP, and didn't even know he was connected to a collective in the past. At one point, he even ended up paying for the funerals of several ASAP Mob members who passed a couple years after Yams, including one who was killed and one who died of a drug overdose. But eventually, even Rocky started struggling too. His third album would end up being his most musically ambitious, but it was also deeply divisive, and it left critics and fans confused on the direction of his artistic evolution in a huge way. In late 2017, Rocky announced Testing, an album that he immediately from day one announced would be an experiment. And even though it was the first album he worked on without Yams, with features from Frank Ocean, Skepta, FKA Twigs, Moby, Kid Cudi, and more, and production from people like Dean Blunt, Clams Casino, and Blood Orange, Rocky's creative spirit was clearly just as strong as ever.
He said, French Montana and Frank Ocean on the same song, I want to do things that you would never hear, mixtures and combinations that were unheard of.
But unfortunately for Rocky, the risk didn't exactly pay off. Testing would be his first studio album to not debut at #1 on the Billboard charts, peaking at #4, throwing a giant stick in the spokes of his success as someone who was previously considered one of the biggest rappers of the time. Even worse, a lot of people absolutely hated this album.
A$AP Rocky is an awful singer, and he's barely holding it together as a rapper these days. I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this album.
And a lot of these songs don't even sound finished. A lot of these songs don't even sound finished to me. Like, I'm like, what is he doing?
I'm with you, B.
Oh my God, when like call drops, fuck sleep, praise the Lord, I was just like, this shit sounds so unfinished. I'm like, what?
At the same time though, it might be my favorite project he ever worked on. There's something melancholic and bittersweet about a lot of the songs off Testing that makes it feel totally unique, especially towards the end. Whether it's the sad, bluesy verse from Kodak Black singing through a prison phone, or the slow, trippy, emotional beats from 143rd, which producer Blood Orange said was meant to feel like a cross between 90s Memphis rap and the legendary rock band the Cocteau Twins, Testing is a genuinely beautiful and thoughtful project. And then there's the lyrics, which are, in my opinion, some of the realest Rocky ever wrote. I don't think anyone would say lyricism had ever been A$AP Rocky's main focus. He's always been a really talented, good rapper, and a lot of his verses were cool and memorable, but it was never quite the part of his music most people talked about. But a lot of the lyrics on Testing revealed a whole new dimension to Rocky as a person and what he was going through at the time. Purity is probably the most obvious example, where he and Frank Ocean rap sentimental lyrics over a Lauryn Hill sample. And during Rocky's verse, he opens up about his sister's passing just after the Cozy tapes came out, talking about how he's lost someone in his life right around the release of all of his projects, with Yams dying just before Long Last A$AP and his father passing away not long before he dropped Long Live A$AP in 2013. And while Testing does have bangers like Praise the Lord, Fuck Sleep, and A$AP Forever all being pretty successful when this record dropped, these more sensitive, thoughtful, sentimental songs tell an interesting story about the person Rocky was becoming behind the big, almost invincible facade of the fashion icon, rock star, pretty boy rapper. But overall, for me, it's just as musically interesting as the rest of his work, with a wide range of sounds and moods and a beautiful feeling of melancholy throughout the project. When it failed to become a commercial or critical hit, though, most fans thought that Rocky would come back pretty soon and try again to keep building on his legacy and make sure the game didn't forget about him. I think the last thing people expected was that he wouldn't drop another album for the next 7 years. It wasn't that A$AP Rocky didn't make music or just completely disappeared since 2018 though, not at all. He actually announced his 4th album, All Smiles, just a year after Testing dropped, but that seemed to have been eventually delayed and then scrapped. Shortly after that though, he got into a relationship with Rihanna, who he called the love of his life, and not long after, they had 2 kids. And pretty quickly, for Rocky, now in his early 30s, fatherhood became a huge priority. He said this,
I don't think there are many people in my culture who advocate for fatherhood and parenthood. The player persona is very pushed. When you think about a rapper, you think about adolescence and the single bachelor lifestyle. What completes my life now is being present as a partner and a parent. My evolution is embodying and embracing fatherhood, parenthood, companionship, and family.
It was a pretty big turn for someone who had once said he was addicted to sex since he was a teenager. And it's not like he wasn't busy with work either. Shortly after modeling for Bottega last year, he launched a ready-to-wear collection under OG at Paris Fashion Week, his creative agency that was also responsible for a lot of the amazing music videos and visuals he's put out over the years. Rocky described the collection as ghetto expressionism, inspired by the aesthetics of Tim Burton films and artists like Outkast. From fashion magazine The Impression,
Rocky's collection features unconventional designs such as backless business suits and layered hip-hop style outfits with multiple waistbands. The rapper described described the collection as political satire inspired by poverty, homelessness, mass incarceration, and capitalism. Notable looks included models carrying garbage bags full of money and outfits embellished with references to American symbols like the flag and Uncle Sam. Rocky drew inspiration from personal experiences, including growing up in a homeless shelter. Of course, during this time, Rocky also dropped a whiskey brand, modeled for Gucci perfume, and dropped Puma sneakers with F1. But it wasn't all positive. In 2019, Rocky was arrested and jailed in Sweden after getting into an argument with a group of people who had been following him around Stockholm, spending a month in a Swedish jail on assault charges before getting cleared to go home after President Donald Trump threatened trade restrictions against the Swedish government if they didn't send him back. Right after that, the COVID pandemic hit, which delayed countless album releases, and then shortly after that, in addition to becoming a father and a family man, Rocky was arrested by LAPD and charged with assault with a deadly weapon, beginning a legal battle that would cost millions of dollars and go on for more than 2 years. The story was that he got confronted by a former ASAP member in LA over whether or not he would pay for the funeral for another ASAP member who passed not long before, and the situation allegedly led to Rocky shooting at his former friend when the argument got physical. Although it was later shown that Rocky had in fact covered the funeral out of pocket, the murky specifics around the alleged shooting eventually turned into a trial that got pushed out for several years, with Rocky facing a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Eventually, he was finally found not guilty by a jury on February 18th, 2025. But despite the favorable outcome, Rocky was forced to push back his fourth album into sometime in 2025, after he had already promised that his fourth record, Don't Be Dumb, would first come out on August 30th, then in the fall, and then in the winter of 2024. With his legal battle going on for longer than expected though, all these targets were missed, and there's still no official release date in the spring of the next year. And in the years following testing, Rocky's dropped more than 10 lead singles, all of them stylistically interesting, but most if not all of them being failed starts to various album rollouts, especially for Don't Be Dumb, when in the summer of 2024 he was on a press run and it seemed like the album was really about to drop, and it ended up not coming out. It led to a lot of these kind of weird, half-forgotten singles that didn't make as big of an impact as they were supposed to, just because the album rollouts never really got finished. Which is actually really sad, because a lot of these songs like DMB, Hijack, Taylor Swift, and Same Problems are some of the most interesting tracks Rocky's dropped in a long time. There's unique production, beautiful songwriting, interesting themes, and an atmosphere unlike anything else he's worked on, and it's sad to see them go underappreciated. It's been 7 years since testing, and during that time, Drake has dropped 8 full-length projects, Kendrick Lamar put out 2 huge albums, Kanye West dropped 5 records. I mean, it's been a lifetime. When testing dropped, I was a teenager who didn't even have a driving license yet, and now I'm 25 years old. I think a lot of Rocky's original fans feel the same way too. But the thing about Rocky is that he stuck so close to the artistry and all the music he did make that it's still timeless today. There's a reason why Rocky's music from 15 years ago still goes viral today, when almost no other artist could say the same.
Yeah, they're not. I'm an overall artist. I'm not just a rapper, and that's why I appeal to people, because I grew up around like hipsters and stuff like that. Vice magazine supported us in the beginning.
Plus, Rocky had a huge influence on artists that would come after him.
That's around the time. It's just like it was going too crazy. Like everything influence was just Flacco.
And Rocky, man, he like a whole package though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
he is.
And so ultimately, while Rocky's time at the top of the charts might be behind him, his legacy speaks to something that's more important than just numbers.
My concern isn't being the best, my concern is doing my best. That's just about it.
And for any artist trying to find their path, Rocky's career is proof that authenticity and courage matters a lot more than following trends or playing it safe.
I realize that the reason why most artists make the music that they make is because they want to sell records to make money, because they feel like that's what's needed for pop culture. And I'm here to tell them that you can make alternative music and make more money than your favorite pop rapper.
And there's another lesson in there too. Despite becoming known around the world, famous for so many different things, and becoming this larger-than-life, almost absurd cartoon character, Rocky's past never completely disappeared. In a 2024 interview with Billboard where he took a video team through Harlem, he stops to pause for a minute and reflect on his brother's death, talking about Ricky being killed when Rocky was 13 years old, dying on the same block he was born on. Most people think of him as a big, crazy rock star who's defined by an obsession with women and sex and drugs and expensive fashion, but that doesn't mean that those two things, the big rock star rapper and the kid who had been through a lot of pain, aren't connected. In 2015, after the death of Yams, he said,
I'm a happy spirit, and I feel like time heals. Life is about good people with good energy, and I'll be fine. God is good, and I keep hope and faith.
It is kind of something that Rocky has always kept at the edge of his persona, but one journalist did ask him about this to his face.
They said, "It leaves me wondering whether the many tragedies in A$AP Rocky's life left scars on him." I raised the question with him, but it's not a subject he wants to discuss very much. He answers with ambivalence, saying, "Probably," before falling quiet until I change the subject.
And so it isn't exactly something that he yells out loudly in his music, and he even avoids the topic in interviews, but it's clearly something that's followed him through his career, art, and life. Even while he was changing the game, making big hits and classic albums, you'll sometimes catch a lyric or a song where Rocky looks straight at the trauma and the grief just for a minute, and then goes right back to his optimistic, creative persona. On Testing, he talks about his career even being cursed, feeling like he couldn't escape tragedy no matter how high he climbed. And so throughout his whole discography, there are these powerful moments of vulnerability where he drops the invincible persona and opens up about his struggles. And these glimpses into his psyche, whether it's about his brother's death, losing Yams, or reflecting on his journey from homeless shelters to fame, it adds layers of depth. These moments may not define Rocky's catalog of music, but it shows that his persona isn't just about being cool. It's his own way of taking back control and healing from things he's been through. By reinventing himself with art and fashion and self-expression, he changed his own life forever. Being a dad to 2 kids, making music that's more imaginative than ever before, while people still bump his old stuff like it's new. All of that is genuinely the happiest ending someone like him could ask for. He might have stopped chasing the title of the biggest rapper in the game, but when your legacy is already solidified and when you've already changed everything, why not take a step back and change yourself for the better as well? Most of all though, the story of A$AP Rocky, it shows people like us trying to find our own paths that your past doesn't have to define your future. I think for a lot of people who come from a difficult background, it feels impossible to take risks. It feels impossible to reinvent yourself or even express your emotions to the outside world. When it feels like you've been through so much, A$AP Rocky, in his own way, shows that that doesn't have to stop us from being who we want to be, which in the end is worth more than all the streams and record sales in the world.
And there have been many times I feel like I don't even get to choose what to cover on my channel because of the algorithm, the pressure to be prolific. It can be stronger than the pressure to be creative. Even this video was risky to make because Rocky may have a fascinating story, but you never know if people will care about this or just want to swipe through shorts and TikToks instead of watching a full documentary. One of the projects I really struggled to make for YouTube was Danger Music. It's a documentary I made about the history of violent music with all of the raw footage included, talking about bands that committed murder and burned down buildings over their music, performers that hurt the audience or destroyed the concert venue or threw poop at their fans as part of the show. I think it might be obvious why ultimately it's not on YouTube, because it just isn't a YouTube video. Danger Music is a Nebula original, funded by and exclusively available on Nebula because of their mission to be the best place for creators to make work that we couldn't make anywhere else. They gave me the resources to make the best documentary I possibly could, and I think it turned out really great. Nebula is a platform I own and co-founded with other creators as a place where we can elevate ourselves to a level beyond what we were previously capable of. We've come together to create our own platform, and it's quickly becoming the most interesting, fastest growing independent video platform anywhere. It's not our safe haven, it's not a place to hide from the rules, it's a place to grow and blossom into something completely different. Nebula has produced originals like Lindsay Ellis's Ballad of John and Yoko, which dives deep into the unintended consequences of the murder of John Lennon. It's a beautiful documentary exploring one of the strangest stories in modern music history. And they have even more interesting shows like the in-depth geopolitics show Modern Conflicts or Jet Lag, which is a travel game show where the players use the literal real world as their sandbox. It's a unique concept which is exciting and wouldn't be possible without Nebula. We're even producing a movie. It's called The Dinner Plan. It's directed by Patrick Willems. It's coming out in a few months and it got covered in Variety, one of the most popular entertainment magazines in the world. So Nebula is becoming the answer to the question, how do you make art or content that's as high quality and interesting as traditional media without the corruption and exploitation associated with that industry? I've always wanted to take my videos to the next level and make them more substantiated and more interesting than ever before, and Nebula is enabling that for our entire list of creators. Better stories, better production value, taking creators to the next level is what Nebula is all about, and it's only getting better as time goes on. So if you want to join a platform that's pushing entertainment forward, enabling us to make things we never could have made before, you can get access to exclusives like my Danger Music documentary documentary and high-quality, thoughtful videos from hundreds of other creators like Adam Neely, Todd in the Shadows, Polyphonic, FD Signifier, Bobby Broccoli, and countless other storytellers, you should join Nebula today. So go check out my show Danger Music or Jet Lag or The Ballad of John and Yoko by going to nebula.tv/Volksgeist to get 40% off, because Nebula is only $30 per year when you use my code. Not only is it the most interesting video platform anywhere, it's also affordable. I even have a Nebula exclusive class breaking down my entire video production process from writing to graphics and more, which I think a lot of you would enjoy as well. It's not just any project, it's my project, and it's a project you don't want to miss out on.